You're listening to Symposium, a year-round conference in the arts, brought to you by Pipeline Artists. This isn't just us rambling about feedback. We really are here to answer your questions too, and to have this be very interactive. Because if any of you listen to my Reckless Creatives podcast, you know I'm not that great about planning. So this is a whole fun wing it session. But welcome to Hard Truth's straight talk about handling feedback. So we're here tonight with, I'm not sure how all of your panels are looking. I think it's different for everybody, but Doug Richardson is here, who's a screenwriter, Die Hard, Bad Boys, Hostage. You probably see him on Twitter by Doug Rich. And he's also a novelist. So he's got a lot of writing experience across mediums. And Merridith Allen is here, who has taught for us in Symposium. She's a screenwriter. She's been in a lot of fellowships. She also is an instructor and does consultations. She's wonderful. She's amazing at log lines. And every quarter we do a log line workshop with Merridith. So watch for those. And Matt Misetich, who is one of the big cheeses at Pipeline Media Group, and you probably see him being sassy on Twitter. And Michael Owens, who's an executive at Pipeline, and he's been here for, 10 years.
A decade. Yeah, I think it's a decade.
Yeah. And Michael does a lot of notes and contest judging and, developmental help. He's wonderful. A lot of great insights. So we're just going to kind of jump right in. So basically, we're going to talk about feedback, how to, kind of handle it, and how it might kind of stall you, give you a little block, and how to get past that, and how to figure out what to do with all those notes that you get from various people, and who might be the best people to ask for notes. So Matt and Michael are part of the company. So you guys have been doing notes for a long time. What do you see as let's start with the basic question, when should someone seek out notes? At what point in the writing process is it time to say, I need some fresh eyes on this?
Honestly, I think it's as early as possible. You kind of want to get feedback on basic concept, on the structure, on how the story's kind of operating, just from the idea stage, I think. Because a lot of the time what we see is just scripts that are well structured, or scripts that have a kernel of a good idea, but they haven't really found the true idea yet.
Yeah.
I think really this as early as possible is the best time to actually start getting at least reactions. Maybe not full feedback, but reactions.
We get that question more often than you would think, actually. Where writers are like, when should I, submit for notes or submit for general feedback? And I would say before you start writing the script. Honestly, it's at the idea stage, because you don't want to start writing something, whether it's a script or a book, that's based on an idea that's not great, or that's, God forbid, been done before or been done recently, because then it's kind of the process, I think, is relatively moot at that point. So it's also the one thing I think writers get feedback on the least. They tend to just write the whole thing, first draft, or a deeper draft, and then they get notes on it. And then you almost kind of have to backtrack and say, well, there's something flawed in the plot, there's something flawed in the story or the concept, and you kind of end up with a total rehash. For some writers, that's their process. They have to write the whole thing in order to figure out what the central idea is, and that's fine too, I guess. I always felt like that was a little bit inefficient. So notes at the idea stage, I would say, is the most important.
I know, Doug, sometimes you and I will talk to each other. There's this story I'm trying to write now where I was called Doug and said, what do you think about this? What if I do it this way? And we do
right.
that.
Yeah. Yes, we do. It all depends on the source, who you're doing the feedback with, because, if you trust the source and it's someone who you've either gotten good feedback from before, or helpful feedback from before, or they know what they're doing, versus talking to just any old Joe or someone you haven't gotten feedback from. It's hard to divine what is bullshit and what isn't, because they're going to lie to you at first. People are first thing they're going to do to you as adults is lie to you because they want you to like them and they don't want to say they don't like your idea. That's the hardest thing to do, is to get people to stop lying to you or being nice or being polite. You need to get them to be honest. So if it's you and me, Jeannie, I know you're just going to go bare bones. This is what I think, unvarnished. I trust you. If I haven't worked with someone before, unless they're paying me, and I know if they're paying me, then their notes are, mean a lot. You want to make sure they're not being polite. You want to make sure they're being honest with you so you can figure it out. And you have to give them permission, and that's hard.
Someone said in the chat that he goes to his ex-wife.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Of course.
A quick note too, if you're dropping something in the chat, because I make this mistake every single Zoom session, make sure you put to everyone if you want everyone to see it, or just to us if you only want us to see it.
He might have only wanted us to see it. So
yeah,
that's
maybe
why I didn't
so.
say his name. So
good.
But so Merridith, you work with a lot of students, and so at what stage do you feel like what do you think the hardest thing for them is to handle with notes and getting feedback?
Interesting question. I think again, every writer is different, and it depends on where they are in their own writing process and how experienced they are to answer that question. So I think what Doug said was really important about trust your source. And then about, okay, so then there's the idea stage, and is this a good pitch to swing at, for lack of a better way to put it? And then, is somebody going to be giving you honest feedback, or are they going to be bullshitting you? It's all really important. And I think that sometimes beginning writers, they have a really hard time discerning those things because they're not in a place with their own craft yet. And so working with writers, it's also really important to meet them where they are. So, and not to overwhelm them by giving them maybe everything all at once. And to go okay, so this writer is at this stage in their craft. We're going to really, really work on, what does the character want for this session? That's what we're going to focus on. Later on, we might build out, the other parts of the craft too. We're going to talk about theme. We're going to talk about how are you putting your action on the page? Because there's so many different moving parts. But when you're more experienced, and you have writers that have been doing this for a long time, some of my writers I've been working with for years at this point, they can kind of handle okay, one thing at a time, but we're going to talk about all the things, and they'll go away for 2 weeks and do their stuff and come back and we'll have another chat. So it depends on where they are in their process to, what they can and can't handle.
One of the things I always felt really helpful, I would take, I would get it whenever I was ready to get a look at my draft. I'd have a couple people that I'd ask, but then I'd keep this one draft of it where I would put notes in there that everybody said, and I would put like Doug notes in yellow and Matt's notes in green, or whatever. And then I would see if that made it easy for me to see if there was a common thread, multiple people saying the same thing, and I always made sure to leave notes that were positive, that weren't saying to change anything, oh my God, I love that. I love that. I always left those in the script even till the very end, because it was I didn't want to mess with the thing that was really working. And also just a reminder that I did something right that people liked, that sometimes I needed to go back and just look at that and say, oh, I'm not a hack.
Oh yeah. Well, for me and for anybody, if you love something in your script, it probably points to something that's going really well craft wise too. Even if that thing that you love the most, which happens a lot, has to get cut, it'll point to something else that's really working. So I totally relate to that.
Yeah. I would say I've gotten the best 2 notes from Doug. And these apply to every project that I do. He talked to me about, I remember one day being in his, writing cabana, and him explained to me about character intros. That's your one chance to be a little bit more, lean a little bit more into the prose and kind of pull the agent who is representing the actor you want to play, to pull them in, because they immediately flip to that page. So that I thought was a really great note. Do you remember giving me that, Doug?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then the second note he gave me that that sticks with me and will stick with me forever. There was a scene where I had to have a kid kidnapped, and Doug said to me, before you write this, I want you to think of a way it's never, ever in the history of film or novels or any kind of storytelling that it's never been done before. And then do that and tell it that way. And so, though, especially those pivotal, really inspired, like scenes that really matter, turn the story on its head, like that one always sticks with me. Where do you remember first hearing that, Doug? Or that was just
that wasn't hearing it. That was just from experience and the competitive nature of screenwriting. In that, you have, every draft of a script until you're in production is a sales draft. You're selling the agent, you're selling the buyer, you're selling the manager of the movie star, you're selling the financiers on what you want to do. And then you're eventually in that point of production, and then it gets more, nuts and bolts. So, you're in a competitive business with a lot of people trying to be really, really good. You want that person to read it to feel like they're reading something fresh and new. So you have to really use as many storytelling skills as you possibly can to try and come up with a new way to tell an old thing, which is what? A kidnapping. To show it in a way, or to reveal something in it in a way that's different, that feels fresh, just for the reader. Because everyone, the problem with screenwriting is that everyone reading your script, but for those people who are giving you feedback, they're all quantifiers. They're not reading it because they love to read or they're being entertained. They're reading it because they have to, for some reason, for their job, for their whatever. So you want to do your best to entertain them within that read, their job. They have to read it. So you want to, anything you can do within the read to make them go, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. Mm-hmm. And have it work, of course, is a bonus.
That's such a good note too, because I think a lot of writers, might get that piece of feedback, and then their next question would be, well, how do I do the kidnapping to make it different? And that's not the question for the reader. That's the question for you, right? Almost 100% of the time, and Michael can attest to this too, if we ever get, a question on feedback or even a criticism, it'll usually be like, well, they didn't tell me how to do this, this, and this. They just gave me like a broad note on like what, needs massaging or what needs tweaking. And that's the thing. I've been telling our readers this for years, anyone new we hire or just as a reminder annually, that never say like, you have to do this, to fix it, to fix a plot point, to fix a character or a piece of dialogue or something, or you need to do this or you need to do that. You can give them suggestions. But I always say just keep it broad, give examples and potential solutions, but don't get too specific for it, because there's multiple solutions, to any issue in a script. So I like that. I also like the fact that it's basically my rule of just do the opposite, especially when it comes to concepts. Look at what's done before and then just think of like the opposite and see if that could work. Right. More often than not, it ends up being a pretty decent pitch, just by using that approach to it.
Okay. So somebody's got a question. Just a reminder, stick your questions in the Q&A box as opposed to in the chat, but this one's in the chat, so I'm just going to read it. Character development is where I get bogged down. I have 90 plus pages, but still need it for some reason. How do I fix it without making it so long that no one will read it? Like, do you always like worry about the length, or are you worrying about the length like way later?
Well, if it's screenwriting, you're worried about length from page 1. Period. You've got people who, they used to, now they're doing it in a PDF. You'd have producers, they'd pick up a script and they'd weigh it like that. Ooh, this feels like it's about 125, 128 pages, feels a little fat, and sometimes they will go thumb to the back page. or they'll thumb through it and see how thick the description is, which is giving them an opinion instantly on how much they're going to really enjoy reading it. So you want to be light and fluffy and quick and efficient as you possibly can, while at the same time creating the illusion that they're watching a movie, or watching a television show. If when it comes to screenwriting, and it's moving pictures, so it's got to move. It really does. That's where, and there's no rules, by the way, to how you do that character development. I've seen it done so many different ways, and how you make your script brief, how do you make it flow? It's your style, but you've got to come up with a way to convince the reader that you know what you're doing. You have a great idea. The characters are going to pop. A movie star is going to want to be in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You got to think about all of that while you're doing it, but do it faster.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a lot of tricks about like just slicing and dicing, like at the end, like Merridith, maybe talk about how, or Michael or Matt, anybody, like I have a process of what I do to cut pages at the end. Like, do you have any, and I actually wrote an article for Script Magazine about it years ago, and I'll put it in the recording email so you guys can go look at that article. Do you have any tricks, Merridith, about how you keep to a certain length and still handle all the notes that you might be getting and need to do with the story?
When I'm at the phase in, where I'm really looking at that length, okay, I'm going 90 to 105 pages maybe is where that's my goal. I'll treat it a bit like poetry. So it's like, how can I be as concise as possible in my action and in my dialogue? If I'm saying anything more than once in the dialogue, I get rid of it immediately. How can you say as much as you can with as little as you can? I've been really fortunate in my life, because I come from playwriting and I come from theater, to have worked with some amazing actors. And so I've seen what actors can do with so little. So I know that I don't need all of this stuff to, allow them to do their jobs and allow everybody else to do their jobs well. So I'll really think about them too. And I'll go like, oh, if I gave this to the best actor that, that I knew that was working on this, what could they do with this amount in this scene, kind of a thing. I mean, there are a lot of different tools and tricks for cutting dialogue and cutting action, but treating it really like poetry, and also allowing, if you're looking at dialogue and you're looking at action, allowing the idea of the actor to breathe and say as much as possible with as little as possible. That always helps me in terms of like the micro stuff. And then when you're looking at the macro stuff, like you're looking at a character arc or a character thread, occasionally two characters can become one character. That's a little trick that I learned a long time ago, because sometimes two characters are doing the same job. Sometimes you've got different threads doing the same thing, and you're wondering why, like what, you have all these characters that are well, sometimes you don't have all these characters that are doing the same thing, but like if you have two, for instance, they can be combined, or things like that when you look at the macro stuff.
Yeah. And sometimes you have a subplot you don't need, or anything like that.
Exactly. Subplot you don't need.
Yeah. Michael, what are your thoughts about handling feedback that you don't agree with?
I think that it's important whenever you get feedback to kind of take a break first. Every time when you get your email and someone's emailing back saying, this is what I thought about your script, you always have this initial reaction that you think, oh my God, this is the draft that they're going to love. This is the draft that's going to be the perfect one. And then when you open the script and you see this page of notes, you're like, oh crap. Like, you just kind of have an immediate reaction. And it's always important for me to just take a step back for like a day or two, or maybe a week, and actually sit down and think, is this note valid? Is this a good note? Like, that's kind of the first step, just to actually go through my feelings about how this note is and whether or not I agree with it. And if I don't agree with it, then that's a whole other process. Like, why don't I agree with it? What does that note change about the story that's so vital to it? Is there a way to kind of address this note in a different way? Like, if you're saying the villain's motivation doesn't make sense, well, is there a version that I can kind of change to make it something I like? Is there some dialogue I can give to make it make more sense? Whenever someone gives you notes, they're not coming from a place of they want to make the script worse. They're trying to help you make it better in some way. I think it's kind of just important to see if there's some underlying issue that maybe they're not expressing.
It's like the note behind the note.
Note behind the note is kind of the big one. Yeah.
I think there's like I don't know if it's a evolutionary thing or not. There's always this visceral reaction to getting, a lot of like critical feedback, right? No matter who it's coming from, whether it's, I don't write for film and TV or anything anymore, but I went back to writing fiction, and Jeannie gave me notes and thoughts on the first chapter of a book, and I'm like my first 3 seconds, I was like, what does she know? And then I'm like, oh, right, she's absolutely right. So I would always recommend you take like a day to just sit on the notes. Don't even have any opinion. Just read it sort of objectively, and then you can kind of go through and see what makes sense. The other thing too is every note is subjective, right? That's why it's good not to go to any one single person for feedback. You have to kind of go to multiple people, either people you might know, or paying for feedback if you need to, or go having that circle of trusted sources, all with preferably I would recommend with different sensibilities, so you kind of get you different perspectives in that sense.
Yeah, that's the other thing. If one person tells you this doesn't work, that could just be personal taste. It could just be one person's reaction to it. If you have 5 people telling you that, then that thing doesn't work. You need to fix it.
Yeah,
and they should be qualified. We're skewing off the question, but this is worth noting in case I forget. They should also be qualified, like what Doug was saying, I think earlier. I think it's nice that you would get feedback from like your parent or like your brother or your sister or your friend or something that's not like in the industry or that's not a writer. Because ultimately, I guess that's your audience and that's the thinking, but they won't really know how to give you the feedback you need to better your work. That's a whole skill set, in my opinion. So going to going to some sources that are qualified to do so is a must.
Like everyone who works at Pipeline.
Everyone that works at Pipeline. Actually, everyone that works at Pipeline is
everything
qualified.
Behind the paywall.
Yes, everything behind the paywall.
So, notes are just like writing. They're a version of writing. They're communications. 80% of human communication is nonverbal. It's what we get from our expressions, what we get from people see from our hands and how we gesture and the tone and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I think notes are like 95% nonverbal. And I think it's the term being the note behind the note. I would say in my long and dubious professional career, I would say 95% of the notes that I've received have not been the note they meant to give me. It is very rare when you're working with someone who really understands the process and what you do, structure, character, all the other stuff. Also, what you're trying to do as a writer, what you're trying to put across, communicate with them story-wise. So their response it's very rare when you get a response where they say, hey, slot tab A into slot B, and that'll fix it. It's just they're rarely going to be that specific. And when they are that specific, where it's like, wow, I really think here she should have said this because, or right there, if you just change the order of that dialogue, that would work for me. Usually they really don't know what they're talking about because they're not you. You have to then go in, and that's the hard part about written notes, because you really want to get in the room and get them on the phone and get them in person, or find a way to get a dialogue with them, because you want to ask them why, and not in a way that says, I don't trust your note. It's I want this dialogue doesn't work for you. Why? Does it make you feel funny? Does it sound unlike the other dialogue? You want to get to what the source is, why it's not working and ringing a bell for them. And only in doing so, at least in my experience, my personal experience, single opinion as a writer, in my experience, I need to get to why it's not working for them, to understand how I can fix it, because I still have to fix it. I still have to make it work for me within my story. or within my job description. If it's a note, because, I've spent my career getting notes from people who are paying me. And you have to, there's a way you have to receive them. And it's not necessarily, with looking like you're in the middle of a stick up. You want to look receptive, and you want to look like you can solve them, and you can make every problem of theirs work, and that's just the whole process. But you still have to kind of get in with them and say, yeah, but, and oftentimes you're going to find that thing that they have a problem with is something somewhere else in the script, is something that needs attention elsewhere, or something that fits with, again, how you want to know if there's 2 or 3 people that have the same note. Sometimes 2 or 3 people have the same note and it'll come out different, yet it's the same note. And unless you investigate it with them, you won't know, okay, I've got 3 people who say essentially my first act was slow. They want me to get to the joke or something. So that's, the importance of dialogue and getting a relationship with those people who are giving you notes, getting in a situation where they're comfortable telling you the truth, and you're kind of comfortable kind of trying to get at the granular parts of what's causing them a problem.
Do you have like, oh, go ahead.
I have a quick question for Doug before we go to the next question. How many times in your many years of getting studio notes and on various scripts, how many times have you been given a note, went back to the script, changed something completely different, and then the original note just like disappeared? They no longer had that note anymore.
Oh, so often. It's again, it's that thing. It's like, okay, I mean, sometimes you're on it and instantly what that note really means, and you fix something else, or you go in to fix that one thing and it's not that at all. You look at it and go, that doesn't change anything. Why did they tell me that? Well, you still have to kind of say, did they tell me that for a reason? Sometimes, and I got to be really frank, at least in a professional situation, sometimes they're telling you that because they really want it addressed. And sometimes they're telling you that because they like the sound of their voice and they want to hear themselves tell you how to do it or what to do, because they're in the power position and you've got to
feel
find
smart,
a way to navigate
essentially.
that.
Yeah,
There have been times I've received notes where I've said, that note is the biggest bunch of horse shit that I've ever heard. And this is just this guy's ego talking because he's got to talk over that exec over there. And I'll bet you the next time I come in, they won't even remember they said it.
Yeah. And I know that's true because I've done it when I was 20 years old in an intern, and I was very lucky enough to be at a notes meeting with a director and a producer and a manager. And I gave a note and they were like, well, that's trivial. And then afterwards, one of the managers was like, never give a note that you don't mean, or something to that effect. And I'm like, okay. And that stuck with me. Don't say a note. And essentially what you just said, don't say a note just so you sound smart in the room.
Right. But they're going to. You're on the receiving end of them.
Yeah.
That's a really good bit of feedback for a potential executive or someone giving feedback. But as a writer, you're having to take all of this information in to figure out how best to manage it and make your story communicate better to them, and you've got to be just this funnel that figures out either quickly or over time how to manage it into the words and the next draft to get you to the next step.
Yeah.
And the best thing to say in a meeting when that happens, when you get some sort of stupid note that you're so obvious, it's just be like, oh, that's really interesting. Let me think about that. And then you just write it down.
Make
and then
sure
they feel
you
really
write
happy.
it down, as bad as it is. There's another trick. I mean, most writers, look, our job is we want to go back and get behind our screens and do what we do. That's kind of what we do. We are not in the interface business. That's not our nature, but that's part of making movies. You're interfacing all the time and you're solving problems all the time, whether it's a story problem or an ego problem or whatever. So you've got to be there. And if you can create a lively discussion in the room, which was always my trick, because most writers, they'll hear it. They try not to look like a deer caught in the headlights. They write them down. Hopefully sometimes they'll ask to get copies of the notes sent to them, and some minion is happy to write pages and pages and pages of something and send them to you to make it sound like it matters. But the best moments still are if you can engage them in a conversation in the moment, in the room, and have every note be a discussion, an open question, and you're open to hearing about it and talking it through. If you understand your story and your script really well, you should be able to talk it through and problem solve, sometimes right in front of them. Because what happens if you do it in the room in front of them while it's a discussion, they think the note is solved, you've heard them, and that they're really smart. You don't want it to, you don't want to sound like, oh, I solved your problem for you. It's more like, you gave me a great note and this is what I can do with it. You know, and maybe you don't do that with it. Maybe you do something with it later, but most people, they just want to be heard. So the more you make them feel heard in the room, instead of studiously writing things down and getting back to them later, is you're going to get much further down the road. They're going to feel like they can work with you. They like you. They want to be in a room with you, and you made their notes sound good.
Mm-hmm.
This is also an excellent parenting tip.
You know what? You're right. And why didn't I learn that?
Exactly. They just want to feel heard, those little nuggets.
Somehow, maybe you're not listening to me. That's
exactly
not what you don't want to say back.
So Meredith, I want to address this one to you, because I know there's probably a lot of students who might feel this way, have come to you and complained about things, and you might have even felt this way at some point. But Melanie asked, what do you do, what to do or react to feedback that essentially changes your story? And you see the reader didn't get the story or the scene idea, or the reader lacks some knowledge, like a historical fact. Even a fiction story can be within a factual background.
So I think, is she talking about a coverage reader, or?
Yeah, maybe like somebody who gave them notes, like, I don't know what kind of reader, whether it was just a friend who read it and was giving her notes, or somebody from a Facebook group, or somebody who maybe they, submitted them for coverage or a workshop service. But that clearly felt like, when you get the notes and you clearly feel like they didn't get my story, they didn't get what I was trying to do. At what point is it not them, and maybe your story wasn't coming across the way you thought? Like, balancing that out. Like, would you recommend notes from a different person to see if another person had the same reaction? I mean, like, what are your thoughts on handling feedback that you just feel like, did they even understand what I was trying to do here?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that same thing we've been talking about, like multiple sources of feedback and notes, and then also, trusting and communicating the people that, that are giving you the feedback and the notes. So if you're working with somebody that clearly just, is not seeing your story, is seeing the story the way that they would perceive that they themselves would write it, then that's not somebody who's in communication with you about like what you're trying to get across in the story. And that's one of the hardest parts of being a consultant, certainly, as Doug was saying, okay, like we're all on this mission to get this, to get this thing done the way that the writer's vision is. And so it could be a matter of that she's not working with the right person or the right reader. But if the note's coming back from multiple sources, then it has to do with craft. And so, yeah, so it's like, sometimes I'll joke, I work in translation, because I'm like, okay, wait, you need to take care of this person in this way. The producer needs to be taken care of in a different way than, say, the writer does it during the process. The writer has to take care of the characters and their themes and their craft. And then they've got to give it to somebody that, everybody has different needs. So I guess going back to the original question of like, okay, am I working with the right person? What if they're just not getting it? It could be, yeah, like you might not be working with the right person, or they might not themselves know how to communicate the notes in the right way for that particular writer, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely.
If I can add to that, and this goes back to a little bit of what you guys were talking about at the beginning, which is getting feedback from the very, very start. As you're coming up with a pitch and seeing what people have to say, sometimes, if it's just an idea and you're throwing it around, it's just an idea, and maybe you're trying to find if it works or not. The most important thing is as a writer, knowing and trusting that thing that story you want to tell.
Yeah.
You trust that that's a story that you want to tell. Your craftsmanship may be really bad and you may be unable to tell that story. And that's what the feedback loop is about, is you getting the right feedback to tell you how better to communicate your story. But you still have to keep falling back to, it better be my story. If you're not certain about this being your story, then every little note that someone gives you that turns you, oh, maybe they want this instead of that, and maybe I should turn red into blue, then you're never going to really feel like you have your own voice. Yeah. So it's almost like you got to be on a suicide mission. As a writer, you got to be willing to make your bad story the best thing about it that's still bad. But after a while, you start trusting that this is what I want to tell, and this is how I'm trying to get feedback so I can get it to the next step or across the finish line. There's always going to be someone who doesn't like what you do. There's always going to be someone who doesn't get it, and that's fine. You just let them be that way. But you still have to keep falling back to, this is my mission. This is what I want to tell. Am I getting it across and get more feedback?
I want to just back up a little bit because somebody mentioned in the chat about, this is like when you were talking about getting a dialogue going and all that stuff, like assuming that they were in a position in their writing career where they were actually sitting with a producer or a studio or whatever. But if we back up to earlier in writers' careers, because there's probably a bunch of people here who are in the early phase as well, how do you find that trusted person to give you notes? I mean, I have my own experience I can share, but, want to talk to you guys about, how do you first find something? Like, you've written your first script, and maybe the first script, you're just so excited, you want somebody to read it, you want to get some feedback on, or like your second and third, and you're just like, where do I go? Like, I remember big question people have is I wrote my screenplay, like after I wrote my first one, I was like, well, now what do I do? And I didn't know anybody in the industry. I didn't know anybody who was also a screenwriter to give me feedback, so where do you suggest people start off finding somebody if they don't really have that kind of network around them to give them notes?
I can
Merridith,
tell you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, from my personal experience,
when you're a pro, you do it for a living. Call you. Meredith, call Meredith. That's a start.
Yeah. Also call me. So I came from theater, and then when I wanted to start writing screenplays, I got a book. I had a director friend, and that's how I started to learn the craft. But yes, taking classes and finding somebody who has a good track record of success, but not just not just talking about the writing, but also, who have they helped, and what do those people have to say about them, and what has happened, with their projects, and how have they been served by that consultant or that class or that, that thing that they were, that you were helping them do. Going to writers conferences, you'll meet a lot of writers at writers conferences, making friends, who gets you, who putting a group together, leaving the group if it doesn't work for you, finding another group, finding your people. Like almost like anything, like in acting or in directing, it's a community for sure. Community, communication, and finding your people. And yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Which takes time.
I want to add to finding your people is to finding smart people that you like and respect, who you think have an idea in their head, who think that in all walks of life, we have friends that we would ask advice of and friends we wouldn't ask advice of. We know those people. We're not going to ask them for advice because it's going to be, unless you're looking to get an answer and then know to do the opposite thing. So you can just gather those people in your life who are smart and give you good advice. They don't necessarily have to be in the writing world as well. It helps if they're in the literary world, as in they read a lot, or in their movie world, as in they're crazy movie fans. They watch a lot of movies, or they're very critical of movies. And then you need to empower them. That's the hard part, because I said at the beginning, they're going to lie to you. You've spent all this time working on this thing, and they know it. And you're doing something that they would never have done, because I would never have thought to sit down and spend all those hours alone and write something and then present it to somebody. They think you're being incredibly brave, and they don't want you to hate them. So they're going to say nice things to them, because as adults, we've been trained to be polite to people and be nice to them first. So you need to empower them with your trust that they could be devastatingly, cruelly unvarnished and honest about your stuff. As in, you need to be able to give them permission to say, I really hate it, or this really offended me. And it takes work. It's like anyone you're trying to get advice with, it takes work. You got to go to them and say, the best thing I came up with, if I was giving a new reader permission to be mean to me, it's just, I would find something that I don't like about my work, that I think is not good. And I would then start getting self-critical. Like this right here. This scene, I've worked on it so many times, and I hate it. I just hate it. Every time I reread it, it's just driving me nuts. And once they see you're really trying to improve it and that you're really struggling with it, they'll begin to offer you information that's in the negative. You give them permission to be hurtful, and then you reward them for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Really appreciate that honesty. And that's how you build that relationship with them. And eventually you now have a smart person who you can give anything to, and they know their job is to hit it with a hammer and see if it breaks.
Yeah. I mean, when I first started, I had nobody in the space, and we asked friends, and it was stupid. We got the dumbest notes. And then I joined Twitter, and I met a bunch of writers, and then you start just trading scripts with the people who are, and then you start seeing, like, who might have the same kind of sensibilities. Do they like the same kind of movies I like? Are they interested in this genre? Do they have something? Do I like, and ask to read their work? Do I like their work? Do I think that I always tried to get notes from people who are a little better than me, who are a little farther along in the career and their craft. But also I paid for notes. I paid for notes for a long time until I could find that network of people who I then trusted. Like now I know I can send Doug a script or a novel or whatever. But before I had that network, and I looked at it, I know people just bash on script consultants and script services and all that stuff all the time on Twitter. I looked at it as, if I was going to hire a tutor for my kids for physics, why not hire a tutor for myself for my writing? So I took classes, and I found, consultants who I could relate to, and I felt like they really got it. They understood my story, and it was really like having a personal tutor. And that helped me enormously. And I could also ask them questions about the industry and how it all works. And what do I do with this thing once I think I have it the right way? And, that was super helpful for me. And then one thing I would also say, when you get notes from people, tell them what you're looking for. Like, when you're giving them your script, say, hey, I'm really just looking to see if the structure makes sense, or is this character just so horrible that no one is going to root for them. I'm like, give them almost an assignment, like gear them towards, this is what I'm looking for. And when I give notes to people, I always tell them I am brutally honest. So if you're looking for somebody to just like pat you on the head, I'm not your girl. Like, I can't do that. Like, I don't know how to do that. Like, I will never be able to work in the notes division of our company because
you might fit better than you think you would.
Well, so what I do though, and I think this is super helpful, and so I ask people to do the same thing. I print their script out, and like, I'll give them notes in an email, whatever, but I'll tell them, before you freak about, wait until the script comes in the mail. So I'll print out their script, and I'll do what I call an emotional read, where I'll write in all the scenes, like, okay, you lost me here. I don't think this person would have done that. Like, right here, you have completely hooked me, like right here in this moment. And I do this emotional read where I'm not like, I'm just telling them how I feel while I'm reading it. And that coupled with like structure notes or character development notes or whatever, really I find to be super helpful. So you can ask people to do things like that for you too.
I think that's particularly useful too in readings, like when you do a public read or even just a private read. I will all the time direct those in terms of the feedback that I'm looking for, especially if there are a lot of people who aren't writers or who are other type of artists in the room. And I'll always ask things like, what was the story you were telling yourself? Because I might not have communicated what I'm trying to communicate. Yeah, that's a really good one. And then, I love that idea of the emotional feedback draft for the writers, because it's there are the elements of craft that you're using to help elevate the script. And then it's just and then there's a whole other, version of feedback where it's like, this is how it made me feel. I am not going to tell you anything else except for how I felt in reaction to this scene.
I feel like you see that more in fiction in the publishing world, those types of emotional reads where you kind of jot down those little notes rather than with screenplays and pilots. But
well, I have a special little service. I
don't
do it. We'll do a side. Don't ask me.
A side thing. Don't ask her. She's too busy already.
No,
I'm not here to shill services or anything. Obviously, we have our workshop that's been around for years and years and decades. But I was going to say the same thing. Like, all bias aside, like if you don't have that network in place, you're going to have to probably pay for notes, just like an author would pay for an editor to review their first 5,000 words in query letter, right? That's just usually what you have to do. I would be look, everyone likes to have good feedback, and I think there's some companies out there, I'm sure, that like to give good feedback because then that writer comes back to them and gets more notes in the future. Our philosophy, my personal philosophy as well, is just giving writers the honest feedback in a constructive way, right? You have to kind of tell them the truth, and you have to kind of look at it through the lens of someone who will be reading it later on. What would a manager kind of say to this script? What would a development exec say? Rather than a pat on the head and, hey, it was a really great story, nice job. It has to get a little bit more incisive, and the only way you're going to get that feedback is from someone who has the experience. It is qualified to give that feedback. And when I say qualified, I mean they've been reading for multiple years. They're not an intern giving you notes. No offense against younger readers, but you have to read a lot of scripts to be fluent in giving proper notes. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but it took me years to really kind of figure out and get my footing and know what I'm talking about. And I still don't think I know what I'm talking about, but
and I would say you would make probably a really good executive.
Me?
Based on that,
good. I think I am already.
That personal
anyway.
Described. I've had presidents of studios say to me, literally, I don't know how a movie gets made.
Stop it.
I mean, no, I have. I've actually had that happen. I've actually had them say, I have no idea what it is that you do or how you do it. I don't know. I know that I'm in this job and I have to come up with something that Tom Cruise wants to do next year. And if I don't, I'm fired. I mean, that's
because they came up through such a different path, right? That they skipped over all that.
As primal as that.
Yeah.
Where they're just, they can move up the food chain and they get even more lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that same executive, before he said, I don't know how movies get made, he actually was talking to me about a script. He says, I've got this script here that I love. I think it's bulletproof. It's awesome. And it's amazing. And I can't get anyone to look at it. And I've got this script, which is that you're here to talk about, that is a pile of steaming whatever. And I have every agent in town trying to give me their hottest actor.
Oh my God.
And I don't know why.
Yeah.
And he's trying to figure out that at that moment. It is that fluid and dynamic and ever shifting.
Yeah.
All the time, which makes it important that you understand. Jeannie's notes about what I like, what I don't like, what I felt, what I don't felt. Movie people love to talk about, again, quantify it. It doesn't work here. It doesn't feel enough like that movie. It doesn't fit our marketing thing here. But in the end, you're still trying to hook them. You're still trying to move them. And it's not an intellectual form for the most part.
Right.
And they're not generally intellectual people for the most part.
And they're not cinephiles either, a lot of them.
No,
right?
they're not. They're just trying to win the day and get the next job and get a raise and whatever. So any way you could hit them emotionally and move them emotionally and find out how they're moved emotionally and how to put that in your work is always going to work for you. So the kind of stuff that Jeannie's talking about, where you get that read from someone, which is, it worked for me here. It landed here. It didn't land there. Really moved me here. That's a really good feedback. That's as important as any feedback to ever get, to find out if you're on the right track.
I will say too, and we can go on to another question after this, Jeannie, I promise. But I've been reading scripts for 22 years now, 21 years. And I kind of finally figured it out fairly recently that execs and managers and reps and stuff, they just want to have a script that they can read and say, I can't wait to pass this along to my friend at this company or this person or meet with the writer. So, I've always been pretty confident with the types of scripts we pick for our competitions. But the last few years made us realize, and Michael will definitely back me up on this. We've kind of thrown a lot of like, well, is it marketable? I don't think marketable is a real term. Producible is a term, right? But we've kind of thrown a lot of that sort of out the window in those final stages. And we really have to ask ourselves, is this a fun script? Does it mean something? Is it saying something? Does it have a perspective? Does it feel relevant?
Entertaining, compelling, etc.
Right. And ever since we made that shift, last couple of years, 2 number 1 scripts on the blacklist and, other scripts on the blacklist, a couple of specs sold,
that's why AI is not going to win out.
Right.
Because in the end, you guys are looking for the things that are moving on to the next place. They're moving the form forward, and they have something to say, where you've got a lot of people in the business who are just trying to fit a marketing scheme.
There's no formula.
And that's not going to move the form forward.
Right. Formula can't move the form. There's a quote there somewhere. I'll reword it later.
Put that on a mug.
Yeah. Hey, I got fuel your creativity.
That's right. I have one too.
Who wants a mug?
These are our symposium mugs.
Yeah.
So also too, somebody said, just piggybacking off of that, somebody was asking in the chat, are dramas like features still viable or only as TV series, do you think? It's a little off the notes topic, but since you guys were talking about looking for something.
I think I would say yes. As long as it's elevated and different and feels fun to read, basically.
They're still making them. They're making how they're financed and why they're being financed and who's deciding to make them and why is, to me, a brain knot I don't want to deal with.
Right.
But look at just open any of your streaming devices and you're seeing, and there's new product. People are writing it. They wouldn't be making it if someone wasn't writing it, and trying to get it out there. They wouldn't be doing it. They certainly aren't generating a lot on their own anyway. They need writers to bring them stuff.
Let's just get the strike over with. And there's that. Okay, so somebody thumbs up this question, so I want to make sure we get to it. Maybe more of a thought than a question, but at some point, coverage needs to end. Some will chase a recommendation forever. I have an action thriller screenplay that has received 100% and 98% overall, yet still is a consider. Because every analyst will have a suggestion that they are usually different. At some point, a project is just sellable because the buyer, i.e. the producer of the studio, will have their own thoughts and changes. So I guess they were asking your thoughts on that, like in terms of, at what point do you stop chasing someone anointing you with, yes, this is ready, and you just start pitching it.
I think if you're getting,
sometimes you gotta put it down and write something else. Is it ready? And then maybe you go back to it. You keep sending it around. You still keep hoping it'll get grabbed onto. If you feel like it's that close to being done, the timing might just be wrong. Just the reasons why they say yes to making a movie is not necessarily because yours is the best script. That is not what the decision they make in making a movie. It's rarely that. That's how really good independent films get made. It's a great script and someone's great behind it, and they find the financing and it gets made. Most movies are made because they're filling a need, especially today. There's a marketing need. They have their niche. They got they know how to sell that kind of movie. They know what kind of actors they want to put into it. And it that script might be brilliant and perfect and amazing and the right thing in 5 years, or it might be a week too late. You just don't know. That's why you have to pick up and start something else.
Meredith, do you have something you want to add to that?
I'm not sure I could have said it any better than that, but essentially, yeah, you have to be writing all the time and you have to write a lot of things in order to find the what and the when.
Perfect. That's even better. That's actually even better. You win.
Okay, there we go. Competition.
We have a winner, ladies and gentlemen. Send her a mug.
I won't be as eloquent, but I won't be as eloquent. But what I will say is, I've been having the follow-up Zooms with all our finalists from this season, and they've all asked me, like, well, do you have any notes for me on the script? And I'm like, yeah, I have nitpicky thoughts, but like, that doesn't mean you have to change it. It's not going to make or break the script. A lot of the little things, right? Writers always seem to think like the typo on page 80 is going to like get them a pass, or like they misnamed a character, or the scene just doesn't work. And that's not how it works. Either someone likes your writing and they buy into the concept and they see the potential there, or they don't at the end of the day. So I'm a huge proponent of not spinning your wheels too much on a script. I think when you look inward and say to yourself, this is as far as I can possibly take this script, that's when it's done, basically. Until, years pass, months pass, and you're like, oh, let me revisit it. And now I can make it better. But you could tweak a script to death and end up in notes Narnia very easily. And it's kind of a vague question of like where that point is. But yeah, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, and to Matt's point, Michael, when he talks about the scripts that make our finalist list or whatever, like, Joel asks in the question, has there ever been a screenplay written that didn't get any negative feedback notes?
Nope.
Has there
never
been
has been, never will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are people out there that didn't like Barbie. So
well, yeah, like you go on
possible.
Letterboxd, you go on IMDb, and you'll see people giving 1-star reviews to The Godfather. You'll see people giving 1-star reviews to Barbie. And those are both excellent movies. So like people will nitpick every script ever written. There's no script that will never get negative notes because people have different tastes. And I think one of the hardest things as a reader is to come into a script and kind of leave your biases aside and try and give them constructive notes that don't really take your tastes into account completely. Like you can never really leave that behind, but there's scripts I've loved that Matt's hated. There's vice versa. It's kind of impossible to really. A lot of it's like finding the right reader, but a good reader. A good reader, what do I say every week for the last 10 years? Like a good reader will take their subjectivity out of the equation and just look at a script objectively and like, hey, is this a good script? It might not be for me, but is it well written? Is it original? Yada yada yada. Does it fit like someone's mandate?
Right. We have finalists every year that you don't like and that I don't like necessarily, but they're like, yeah, they're most definitely in the top 10 or they're a winner, right? Except for this year's finalists, they're all great. If you're
well, no, actually, I was going to say I actually did like all the finalists this year.
Yeah, actually, which is true. I had no problem with the finalists this year, but anyway.
But I do think, like, I wish that we could and not to get on a script pipeline tangent, but it has to do with notes and feedback and people's reaction to scripts. Like when we have those discussions at the end where we're all coming together on a Zoom call trying to decide who's going to be the winner and who are the finalists. Like it is very, people when they love a script, they will fight for it. And that's what you want the producer or the manager or whoever to read your script, to love it, to enough to fight for it. They know it's not perfect, but they know it has potential. And that's what you're really in some ways selling, is the potential of what it can be. Yeah. Okay, we've already been at this for an hour, so I want to just whip through these few questions that we've got. I wrote a critically acclaimed World War II biography book that I'm adapting to a screenplay. How should I deal with notes that might change the fundamental truth of the story? I have thoughts.
Ooh, adaptation question.
But also truth.
I mean, Jeannie
it's clearly historical.
Like Mark Twain said, never let the truth get in the way of a good story, right?
Right.
So, but yes. I don't know what truth is, honestly.
I mean, it's up to you. Seriously, I'm a crazy fan of don't mess with history. History is important, but on the other hand, it's a movie, and there's certain rules to movies, So don't do that. Then
can I tell that story?
My favorite Doug? Tarantino films is *Inglourious Basterds*. Goodness me,
Yeah.
Was that not historically accurate?
So I mean, it is entertainment. You're required to be entertaining. I think you need to hew closely to your own conscience as to what you're doing with history while you're trying to entertain the crap out of us.
Well, I'm going to tell a story that actually involves Doug. So I adapted a book that won the Pulitzer Prize called Slavery by Another Name. And so it was nonfiction, and the pressure was pretty great. And Doug and Tom Schulman were attached as producers. And so we were going through doing different rewrites. And we got to that point that, like Merridith said, composite character, like changes character. And so there was this one character that we changed, and we actually changed the race of the character as well. And we, made him a composite character. And I remember doing the rewrite and Doug being nervous because he's like, okay, we're going to get killed. Like this is we're adapting some nonfiction. So it's okay to go off in tangents and whatever. But this person, one of these people really did exist. And when people look them up, they're like, this could be problematic. Like, I'm a little nervous. And I was like, okay, let me just try it. Like, it's just ink on a page. Let me just try it. So I do it. I do this whole big rewrite. I send it to Doug. And I remember I'll never forget this. He calls me up about, I don't know, 25% in, 30% in the script. And he's like, God damn it. And I'm like, what? And he goes, I like it. And he hung up the phone. And then he just finished reading it. And he goes, well, we have a problem. And I said, what's the problem? He goes, it's great. He goes, now how are we going to explain that this person isn't real? It was like this, but then immediately got over it because it serves the story.
Again, it's based on a Pulitzer Prize winning book. So it's not like it's based on some novel nobody ever read or some bit of history that's, clicking dust in the back of your local library. It's this very well-regarded book, so you are playing with fire depending upon how much the world knows about the actual character that you're writing. You are going to get daggers. It's just going to happen. You just have to brave them and go with it. You just have to, you're always going to get daggers with history.
I mean, Nolan didn't, he took some liberties with Oppenheimer. I won't drop any spoilers here, but there were lines of dialogue in there that never happened. There were little maybe plot points that never really happened. You can't stick 100% to history in a movie, right? I don't even think you can. It's hard to stick to history in an actual nonfiction book, down to the detail.
My neighbor, right there, a brilliant actor by the name of David Oyelowo, played Martin Luther King and was nominated for an Oscar, for his portrayal of Martin Luther King in Selma. and there wasn't a line of dialogue in that movie from the speeches that Martin Luther King ever gave. They had to rewrite all the speeches because the family wouldn't give permission because they had copyrighted them.
Oh.
And I dare you to go see that movie and not say that wasn't MLK talking to you. Yes, you may know, if you know that exact speech, you may kind of go, wow, he didn't. That part, climbing the mountain, that wasn't in there. Well, but I'd send anyone to that film, you know, because I think it's very fair to the man and to the movement and to history.
I agree. And as somebody who's writing historical fiction right now, it is a struggle to decide what to make up, what to not make up. Like what, basically the choice is if it serves the story, obviously, if the historical aspect of it is important to you and you want to stay as true to history as you can, you do. But then there's certain times when you need those dramatic elements in the story that you have to make up. Like you have to make up all the dialogue. You don't know what these people said. So, but you just look at how they behaved and the things that they did, and then you kind of backtrack it and figure out what was their personality might be like for somebody who did that. Like you have to kind of be a little bit of a therapist sometimes. Okay, this is for anybody. Would you recommend getting coverage from a script analysis that is in your target audience? For example, if I've written a script that would appeal to an audience of single men ages 25 to 45, should I request a reader in this demographic? Do coverage services even allow such a request?
You can. I like to think that, again, if the reader is qualified, they should be able to objectively read anything and recognize a well-written script and a well-written story. I think there's some merit to having a reader, though, that if it's a hyper-specific type of topic, that's someone who's least familiar with that, or that's their genre preferences. I think most of our staff, for example, they're pretty genre agnostic, but there's a few that just do not get sci-fi fantasy, for example. So I would never send her sci-fi fantasy.
That'd be me.
And you probably. Really?
I don't get that.
All right.
Yeah, I don't get that.
So yes, but at the same time, and as Doug will tell you, if the script is good and it gets sent out, like you're not going to be able to have that luxury of getting to pick and choose who reads your script, right?
Definitely
so
not.
You might as well get used to it early on.
And there's a little bit of joy sometimes as a writer. You can kind of raise the bar a little bit higher for yourself. Like, okay, how do I take this story that fits this thing, but how do I put it over the bar for someone that might not be the usual audience for it? Because that's really what they're looking for. 100%. They're looking for something that hits a broader audience. So sometimes it's like it when you get that story past someone who it's not their genre, and they go, wow, this isn't my genre, but I loved it. Then you might feel like you're onto something too. So I would not edit that. I would just send it out there and see what kind of response you get.
Right. It's the same thing with movies, right? A great movie kind of transcends all of that. I'm writing an article series for Pipeline Artists where I'm watching a movie a day, and it turned out it's a lot of movies.
Yes.
I've seen 240 movies that I haven't seen before this year, and one of my favorites of the year, or some of my favorites, like 8th grade. It's about a teenage, a 13-year-old girl. I'm not a 13-year-old girl. I do not have the life experience of being a 13-year-old girl, and I loved it. And it's marvelous because he made it so universal, and the commentary is it just kind of transcends gender and age, because we've all kind of had the same experience to some extent, even though it wasn't that specific, so yeah, if your goal is to make something broad, then it really shouldn't matter, what your reader's demographic might be, technically.
Couple more questions, and then
Sure.
I'm going to ask you all for your final thoughts. So start thinking about what your final thoughts are going to be. Merridith, maybe you want to tackle this one. What tips do you have for improving skills translating written feedback into verbal communication for others in your writing group? So like when you're giving notes to your to other people verbally, like, any kind of thoughts and tricks about not to roll your eyes and say this sucked and crush their soul.
Well, like that, there's the two types of feedback that we were talking about, right? There's the pure gut emotional reaction to something. How do I feel about it? And then I'm looking at it through the lens of craft. So being as subjective as you possibly can, you're looking at a number of different things. You're looking at the thematic resonance, which is really all about, like I call the emotional structure. Then you're looking about what is the want? What are they going after? You're looking at, what is their need versus their want in terms of the character and, building the story. And then what's in the way, you're looking for the conflict. And then you're looking for, the conflict resolution. Is what was incited at the beginning of the scene or the beginning of the movie completed at the end? And that's all very, very technical in like a formulaic way. So if you can stick to that kind of thing when you're offering constructive feedback, instead of going like, yeah, this is not my genre, so I don't know, this, that, and the other thing. I don't know if I like this. I don't know if this person would say that in this moment, etc. If you can stick to that as your foundation when you're giving feedback, I think that it's going to be really helpful for in the broadest way that I can put it. Just looking at the elements of craft and how they're working, and also looking at what state, like if that writer's bringing in out like the very first pages of something, it's going to look very, very different than the finished script, and treating it as such too. Like me pitching a lot less later on in the process because the writer's already got this solidified thing. And hopefully that's been working out for them. That's what I would say.
And the last question, Steve was asking, how do you reconcile conflicting feedback?
Opinions? Conflicting feedback? If you get a note more than once, or if you get, you get the same note in a different way more than once, then pay attention to that. But in terms of conflicting, like if you have a reader that's got a genre preference, like you're saying before, you're not into sci-fi or this, that, and the other thing, then they might be coming from that place. That's, sometimes it's hard to tell, but considering the source, and then at the end of the day, it's like, it's your story. Do you agree with that? Do you not agree with that? And then also not interrogating yourself, but going like, am I receptive? Am I not receptive to this because I don't like the note? Or am I not receptive because like, I know I got to get in there and do some more work and fix it.
Meredith, somebody did ask in the chat, if you could please reiterate what you meant by thematic resonance.
Oh, sure. So theme, or the way that I think about theme, is all about the emotional structure. Like, what's the story really about? So sometimes people differentiate that, like story and plot. What are the events versus what do the events mean? So if this is like, talking about 8th grade, a coming of age thing, what's that character going through on the internal level? Like, what's the internal struggle versus what happens externally? So is that clear? Thematic resonance? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So, okay. So we're going to go around and you guys can talk about like, who wants to start first? I would like to know if you have final thoughts. If you have final thoughts about, I'll start with you, Michael.
Okay.
If you have final thoughts about like anything we've talked about in terms of notes that from your experience, either giving them or receiving them, that maybe would have been good for you to, like, that maybe you wish you knew before you started writing or before you started reaching out to give people notes or to receive notes, just any kind of final thoughts you might have about this whole craziness that is the sadistic thing we do, which is writing.
Well, I guess when I'm trying to implement notes, I always just go back to, like, whenever I start writing a script, I kind of write down my first thoughts and what I want the script to be. I write down, what I think the concept is, what the structure is, what the general vibe is. And whenever I'm kind of feeling lost with notes, I kind of just go back to my first thoughts. I kind of just go back to looking at how I felt when I came up with the idea, and I try and get back into that mindset. Maybe maybe my initial ideas were wrong or off base or just not good ideas. But at the same time, it does help me kind of recenter myself with the script, and it does help me kind of it just helps me think through it in a different way sometimes. because
remember why you're writing in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's such a long process, and 90, 95, 100, 110 pages later, you kind of lose that. So I just kind of want to get back to what made this special enough for me to start writing, and and then just kind of starting with that and going forward from there is really, I don't know, it's a ramble. I rambled a little bit, but I do like doing that.
Yes, and I did
kind of
put you on the spot.
Question. How could you not ramble?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you gave me I could talk about anything I wanted. How could I not just talk about everything and anything?
Tell us your thoughts on cinema.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me pick up where he just was, because I really like what Michael said, having to do with going back to that place, that center, that germ, that thing that you were trying to do. It fits also what I was saying about knowing that story that you want to tell always. And that's always the best way for me to deal with notes. And I have an example, which I won't go into the story, but I had a project that I was way down the road on, and I'd been on this project for years, and nobody knew this project better than me. And they would try and break it, and they'd come back to me with it. That's how, they'd hire another writer, and then they'd fire them and come back to me, because I was the only one who seemed to get this. And I had a director who gave me a note and delivered through somebody else, but it was a huge note. And I just instantly went, absolutely not. The worst note ever. That's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But I've been around long enough. I didn't throw it completely out, even though I think I rejected it out of hand. Somehow it sat with me. And the project, because I knew it so well and I understood it so well, I actually sort of went into my, God, what if they hire her and I've got to actually make the change? So I actually began to kind of run through it in my mind, this note that I just thought was horrible. And wow, it was amazing. This thing that I thought was truly the thing that was going to wreck the movie, was going to wreck the script. When I kind of worked it through, because I had an understanding of what that thing is that I was trying to write in the first place, and I could always sort of go back to there and let that guide me, I went, wow, she nailed it. That's brilliant. And I couldn't wait to do the work. Mm-hmm. And then they wouldn't hire her, and it really pissed me off. So such is the film business. But I do think, when I think of notes, I think of that note all the time. The note that I responded to so negatively, yet I was able to kind of come back around to it and apply it and see if it worked.
I like that, because I think it's actually something that for me that I learned too in writing, like getting that note that I'm like, that's stupid. Why would I ever do that? And then one day I decided, you know what, I'm just going to try it to get it out of my, to shut this person up, to show them how stupid that idea was. It was like a spite rewrite. And I really like Curb Your Enthusiasm. I would own that spite coffee shop. But anyway, and then sometimes you realize, oh, damn, they were right. So it's just a little bit of time, a little bit, so give it a shot. You might be shocked.
I had a trick I used to use. I never told you this. I used to use on actors when they had a bad idea. When you're in production, and the worst ideas can come from actors. Sometimes, as God love them, they're brilliant. They're absolutely magical creatures. But I would get the bad note, and I would say, okay, let me go back to my trailer, and I'm going to write that out really quickly. And I would almost be able to show it to them, and they'd instantly be able to read it and go, oh, that sucks. I'm sorry I said that. Once they read their note, and they saw how it worked in context. But there were a number of times just like that. I went back and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe they know something that I didn't see,
Yeah.
So I love the idea of actually going through the exercise.
Yeah. So Merridith, what are your thoughts?
I'm listening to everybody. I'm like, yeah, staying open, but staying true to yourself too, because if you lose the thing that you wanted to say, then it's going to be chaos, because, if things might get additive and you might be trying to fix where really you have to dig in deeper and be a bit of an archaeologist and go like, oh, what was I trying to do in the first place? Let me go back to my very first draft where I had it, you know? Trying things is always great, because it might just be, it never ceases to amaze me that sometimes you just don't know where the thing is going to come from. That's going to really help push or pull everything into alignment for you, during the process. So.
Yeah. And Matt, as somebody who's been reading screenplays for over 20 years, do you have any thoughts? Oh gosh, I just opened. Are y'all going to be here another hour?
Matt doesn't look old enough to have read scripts for 20 years.
I know.
Thank you.
Know.
I'm only 23. I'm not 23. This is like the tell me your thoughts on the history of cinema question. I can ramble on.
Stop it.
No, I mean, just two things. Do pitch new ideas to like friends and family if they're willing to listen, because that's sometimes when it's actually pretty valuable. If you pitch a script idea to like a layman's, and they're like, "Ooh, that's really good," you might be onto something, because they can kind of analyze that, because everyone can know what a good idea is, I think, sort of. Do not send your first draft of scripts to your mom or your friends who aren't, in the industry. They will not, inevitably, they will probably not give you the greatest of feedback. They may love watching movies, but it's just a separate skill. Always go to somebody who knows what they're doing, or a company with a proven track record of giving good notes. That is my suggestion to you.
Yeah.
Also, 8th grade is really good. I don't know. I liked it. So was Fatal Attraction. I watched Fatal Attraction for the first time finally, because I couldn't rent it from the warehouse in 1991. My mom wouldn't let me, but it's great. One of my favorite movies of all time.
And one other thing I want to add, when somebody asked about asking for somebody who's your target audience or whatever to read, I just recently read Bob Sain's first novel. He's a screenwriter. I think he's got 20 produced scripts now, and he wrote his first novel. And I just read it. I do not like YA. I do not like vampires. I was like, oh God, I don't want to read this. And it's a quick read, and also an excellent example. And Doug has done the same thing, been a screenwriter and also a novelist. So it was excellent example about how you can transition. And he wrote it in the form of a diary, which released him, a diary of a 14-year-old girl. So it released him of all that pressure of writing beautiful prose and all this stuff. And it was really well done. I loved it. I couldn't wait to pick it up. I read it like that. I was like, oh my God, like, I know this is vampires, but like, he did such, like, when you tell a really good story, and it's like, I could imagine it on the screen, because written by a screenwriter, very cinematic. You could imagine on screen. You tell a really good story, the person doesn't have to like that genre. They don't have to, be your target audience. Just like when, we do with Pipeline, like, finalists are picked that aren't, people will advocate for something that's not their preferred genre. Just you're a storyteller. Your job is to tell a really great story, and that's going to make it more universally appealing to everybody and give you surprising notes that you didn't expect, because you're nailing that story. And there was one more question. Somebody really wanted to know how old you were, Matt. You don't have to answer.
What was that again? Oh,
there was one question they wanted to know. How old are you really, Matt?
I am 42 years old. I'm so sorry.
There you go.
How old is Doug and you? And let's go round robin on the, no. Okay.
Is ancient in age?
Exactly.
It can be.
Doug said something.
In comic book lore, it is. So
the other day I said to Doug, I feel old. And you know what Doug said back to me? I feel wise. So there you go.
That's a good answer too.
That's perfect.
That's a good thing to end on, actually.
Yes. So I want to just let you guys know that I'm going to process the recording of this, edit it, and my hope is to get it out to all of you tomorrow. But also I wanted to drop a little, just letting you know what's coming up. On September 12th, we have a workshop, build and customize an author business model, where Sharon is going to go through like actionable items about how to make money as a writer, which we all want to know. And Merridith is going to teach a session about a guide for giving and receiving stellar feedback and notes, which is going to go much deeper in a much actionable item direction than we're doing here tonight. And I'm actually going to let Merridith give a little, I didn't tell her I was going to do this.
Oh,
but
no,
I know,
I wasn't warned.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot. Just a little pitch about what your session is going to be, because I know you're super passionate about feedback.
I am, because I want to see great stories. I want to see great movies and great TV, and I want to help people do it. And I've been doing this for about 12, 13 years now. And so essentially what I'm going to do is going to be almost like a little bit of a pocket guide about, like how I do what I do. And I might talk about a little bit of the, the evolution about, my journey and beginning with giving feedback and receiving notes and all that kind of stuff to where I am now. And what really works for the professional writers and emerging writers that I work with every day. So there you have it.
Awesome.
Wow.
Awesome.
Wish
Well,
we
thank
could
you,
all
guys.
be so succinct.
Can I plug one more thing that's
Sure.
completely unrelated to feedback or even the film and TV industry? But we have a book pipeline winner that got published, and it's coming out in 2 weeks. And I'm dropping the link here. If you could check it out, that'd be great.
And I'll put it in the recording so you guys have a direct link to it, so you don't have to worry about losing it over there. It's called Kill for Love. And Laura, by the way, who the author is also a screenwriter. So it's another good example of, and of course, Doug has a bunch of books. We'll put a link to that in the recording email too. Because it's just, somebody asked if it was easier to go from script writing to novel writing or vice versa, or did it matter?
That's a whole nother symposium.
That's a whole, you know what, Doug, you and I have to have a one-on-one. Yeah, you and I will do a one-on-one on that, where we'll just talk about that.
Could you do it? Everyone here would want a one-on-one between you and Doug. Let's do that for like January or something.
Yeah. Can we have whiskey, bourbon?
Always.
Oh,
I want to come.
yeah.
It's a one-on-one, Meredith.
It's a one-on-one.
We can't be there.
One-on-ones are free, so you can come and ask us questions.
And you can also, but you can come and drink with us.
Can I just come and drink and listen? And
Let's just have a Zoom where everyone's just drinking whiskey. That's
you know what? That is excellent feedback to finish our feedback session. Symposium is brought to you by Pipeline Artists, a division of Pipeline Media Group. To learn more about upcoming live symposiums, visit symposium.pipelineartists.com and follow us on Twitter @PipelineArtists.